Hey guys, Joe D'Amelio here. I'm going to make an attempt to do some commentary over this test run that I made in BizHawk earlier with the intent to teach a couple things about the game. There's not really much that goes on right at the beginning, although the first thing I can mention is that you can buffer inputs when you appear on a screen just like this. If you look at the inputs on the side, you'll see that I was holding right on the D-pad before I even spawned. So when there's something like double tapping to dash, it makes doing that a lot easier, and in terms of precision, it's also a lot more reliable to not lose frames on human error to physically double tapping for a dash, as opposed to holding the first input until you're able to move and then tapping the second right input. If I remember right, you have 12 frames between both taps. This also works with sub weapons, or if there's anything else, just anything. The game takes buffered input when you're transitioning into another screen, so keep that in mind. I'm also assuming that you, the viewer, has at least some basic knowledge of this game, so like don't really want to go over the weapons and stuff. You should know the shockwave that I have right now is the strongest. The first boss here, you only need 9 shockwaves. This is also the fastest method, which is nice because you just throw the 9 shockwaves. In real time, I like to just do sort of a mash with my thumb. Not really fast, but just a little arithmetic, I guess. But you could time these inputs as well, if you're able to. I also wanted to show off this pattern because you can get a double hit with the shockwave there. So right when you enter this boss, you see that I'm holding up, right, and Y. So the shockwave registers immediately. And ideally you would run over and jump and throw the shockwave, but in real time you don't know what pattern you're going to get here. And you're not always going to get a starting pattern where the Dominator stays on this side, at least at the beginning. A lot of the time he's going to slowly move this way. It's kind of like that. So this is why you always want to open with upright and Y and just buffer a shockwave immediately. Then after that, you just do the appropriate movement. If Dominator slowly moves to the left right away, you buffer the shockwave, and then you jump and throw another shockwave, and that should go through him. And then you turn to the left and throw the shockwaves pretty much where you are now. A little on the uphill, but you get the idea. There's also another beginning where the Dominator can move up right away. So he'll move up and then swoop over here. So if that happens, you still open the same way here with the shockwave. And then it would be, he wouldn't do any of these attacks immediately, he would go up. But you're still pretty much doing the same thing here. And he's going to swoop like you'll see him do in a second. And you're doing the same thing, essentially. It's just happening a little bit earlier. The timing for this double hit is hard to explain. I don't even get it all the time. I pretty much just press up, left, and Y barely after Dominator starts swooping. I killed the boss before even having to spam shockwaves over there because of the pattern. I believe in every other case, when you run over here and spam the shockwaves, assuming it's earlier in his pattern, you're pretty much just going to do the same thing and stop right about here, and then just spam the shockwaves. If the Dominator jumps in like a rainbow shape, you should pretty much just reset. Well, not pretty much, you should reset. So again, buffering the dash. It's also very important to know about buffering at least the dashes after a screen transition, because it will matter a lot later on in the run for determining some things. Again, like the first stage, there's not much to go over here, but I will point out a few visual cues that I use to throw this weapon. So first thing, right when I'm under this candle in the back, I will tap the jump button and then tap Y to use the sub weapon. That'll hit both of them. And then this pillar in front of this candle, do the same thing. Nothing going on here, just doing these jumps. But now that there's really about to be something going on. So I try to jump when Lena is about centered with the right side of this candle. This isn't too specific. Actually, this is really just preference, this little part here. But I do almost a full jump. You can see I'm still holding it. Then I let go just before. And now these jumps are really annoying because optimally you'll press and hold jump for 10 frames and then let go. Forget how much you let go for. I believe it's 4. Let go for 4 frames. Jump for 10 frames, let go for 4. And then the third one is always 11 frames for whatever reason. You have to jump and hold for 11. But even then, it's just the rhythm of these jumps is really annoying to get down. And you'll find yourself messing these jumps up a lot. Especially if you're trying to really optimize it. You're going to mess it up maybe half the time, maybe a little less. So I'll show them here. Yeah, those were good jumps. Sorry for the silence there. I thought I gave out misinformation, but the inputs are right. It is 10 frames and then 4 frames, and every third is 11 frames. It looked like visually it was like 15 or 16 frames, but I just totally forgot that visually it's different than what you're actually inputting, if that makes sense. Right here is annoying too, because you got to double tap and then jump and use your sub weapon to get rid of that guy. I don't think you have to use a sub weapon, you can time the slash later. So here to do these jumps I use that part. Let me rewind it a little. This part of the like broken wall thing, I use that end of it. Pretty much jump right here. Similar thing. This one's 5 jumps instead of 4. Same principles. Double tap again to jump out of there. So to throw these next 3 sub weapons, I have similar visual cues as in the beginning of the stage. So you see this sub weapon up here right when I pass it. It's gonna be the second pillar right here. Just jump and throw. And then 2 pillars pass by on either the third pillar or the first one where the pattern of the pillar is the same as like the bottom one of these. Doesn't have the statue on top of it, it's just the actual pillar itself. When you see this, you do the same thing, but you can also remember it as the third pillar that you see in the background. And it's going to be the same for the third throw. But it's not going to be a full pillar, but it's still going to be the third one. So if you want to remember it by 3 and 3, then that's fine. If you want to remember it by just the first full pillar and then the third pillar after, either one is good. Buffer the dash here. And on this screen, second pillar, jump and throw. Second pillar, jump and throw. And then second pillar, big jump and throw because there's a shock wave behind there. on the first pillar after those wizard whatever flying things you throw, and then the second pillar after. Then you jump over these next two. There is random lag variance that you get. As far as I've attempted, there's just no way to control. You get like between 2 to 5 frames of lag. At the final part here, you don't want to use a sub weapon on these two. You want to use it on this one here, and only this one, and use the pillar as a visual cue. Equip your shockwave and go in. So with this boss, there's a couple different openings. I'm just going to explain how this one goes, and I also stall a little bit to show another pattern. So this one's going to start out, he's going to do the big jump. So you're buffering the dash, and right when you're able to move, you dash, jump, and throw your shockwave. So you get that first hit in, just like that. Doesn't matter what pattern you get as the opener, this is what you want to do. Always start with dashing and throwing a shockwave. And for this specific pattern, with this big jump, you just shockwave, shockwave. 3 slashes, use a shockwave. The spear is the worst pattern there, but I show how to recover from it. You just throw a shockwave. This pattern I wanted to show because you can get a double hit. Just jump when the tiger is jumping. And most of the time you'll get a double hit. I'll play it a couple times here since I'm already right at the end. So you can see that it gets a double hit. And you can do more slashes here, it's just the boss is all the way at the end of its health. So I'm just stalling to be able to display this double hit here. So pretty much jump and throw it when the tiger jumps. And most of the time you'll get the double. So again, always open with us. And on this pattern you just throw another shockwave. Do 3 slashes and throw a shockwave. And I'm going to stop right here for a second, because the 3 slashes and the shockwave afterward, you're always going to do when, or not when, but the first time the tiger does the jump over to the left like that. First time that happens, 3 slashes and a shockwave. If you get speared like this, which is the worst pattern, if you're quick enough, the shockwave can go right through and still damage. Sometimes it won't. Just got to kind of live with it. But yeah, always 3 slashes and a shockwave. Just try to remember that. 3 slashes and a shockwave. Because another pattern here is when he throws a fireball right away. So instead of jumping, he would throw a fireball. So he would stay in place, not jumping, stays in place, and throws a fireball. And what you do in this case is you jump and throw the shockwave as always. And then, right as you're about to land, do 3 slashes. And then, I think he always jumps. He always does a full jump to the left. So, you start with the shockwave, 3 slashes. And then I believe it's a shockwave. And then you jump and do 3 slashes and a shockwave. And remember what I just said before, you always do 3 slashes and a shockwave. And you do it with that pattern as well. With the fireball pattern opening. You do shockwave, 3 slashes, shockwave, jump and chase them, and do 3 slashes and a shockwave. And when you do that whole sequence, it'll be at this point. But hopefully you don't get a spear attack. You get something else. But if you do get speared, it's going to be a time loss, but the best way to really recover it is just throwing another shockwave. Then you could throw another one here too and just start slashing. The shockwave really isn't too effective, at least on this boss in particular. The least that you want to use is 5. With all slashes it takes 17 hits. With 1 shockwave and all slashes, it takes 16 hits. With I believe 3 shockwave. No, I think it just goes right to 5. I think it's 0, 1, and then 5. But either way, leaving this boss with 5 or 4 shockwave left over is fine. If you leave with 3, it's going to make a section of Babylon more difficult. Here I'm just stalling because I wanted to show that double hit pattern. Which, one more time, just jump and throw the shockwave. Basically, as the tiger's jumping as well. Should get the double hit most of the time. In Babylon, the execution starts to ramp up in the game. The first thing I can mention is taking advantage of iframes through enemies. When you attack an enemy and you make contact with them, from the first frame you make contact with them, you have 16 frames to go through them. But I'm not really sure if you always do have 16 frames, because when you think about it, I guess it's saying that there's 16 frames of availability for the hitboxes to go through each other, which that's not going to happen from one frame to the next. And I think it's because of that that makes a lot of doing this very precise, or just more precise than it needs to be. It's definitely a lot more precise than it looks. A big problem with trying to make more in-depth tutorials with this game is that you really just need a feel for the game to be able to do a mechanic like this. Especially something like this here. So I'll just show it a couple more times. Here, just jumping up and doing the sword slash. That one's a pretty easy one. I guess it'd be good to practice if you're just beginning. This next one up here, I have multiple cues. So right here, right when Lena is about to hit the upslope, I do a full jump. And then right before you're making contact with this enemy, I time the slash. And this is just another thing where you need a feel for the game, because I don't really have a better way of explaining it. For this specific one, there is a little bit of a music cue. If you can hear that. I'm hitting the slash just about when that note in the background music hits. But it's very slightly off rhythm, so I can't say that's really a reliable audio cue. But it is something. This next one's really tricky too. You don't have to do the strat. You can just do a short jump and try to land right at the edge here and do a slash and jump through the enemy. But with my way of doing this, I'm jumping at a specific time. So when Lena is basically centered with these two poles or pillars, whatever, in the background, that's when I'm going to do the full jump. So this is a little bit late, but there is a little bit of a window here. So full jump, and then again it's just having to feel the game when basically a little bit after I'm coming down from the peak of the jump is when I slash. So jump at that spot a little bit after the peak of the jump. Or coming down from the peak of the jump, rather. And this whole time I'm holding jump. The whole entire time. Even past when I land on the ground, I'm holding jump still. Because your hang time fully depends on holding the jump button. Every frame matters. Like, even when you're just about to land, you can land a frame earlier if you let go early. It's that precise. So always holding jump the whole time, from when I start the jump all the way to the end. You can sometimes get this to work if you slash late, but you'll lose your dash. Just keep moving right so you don't take damage. But most of the time, whether you're too early or too late, you're going to get knocked back here. And if you're really trying to get a more optimized time, your run's over and you gotta reset. So here, right after Lena runs down that slope, I jump and slash. Right in between the two rocks, I do a full jump. And then when Lena is with this pile of rocks here, I do a full jump over this enemy. And then another full jump. You want to execute this first shockwave pretty much when Lena is at the edge of this waterfall. Doesn't have to be at the very edge, you got a window here, but that's just a visual cue that I use. Just be close enough to the edge. You could see I'm throwing here, so its timing is just perfectly fine. So it's gonna hit the first dragon. And this next one, you want to throw when you're close to it. You don't want to be far away, or else it's not going to hit the next dragon. So here, I'll even frame advance it. You see I'm pretty close. So you can't be paranoid about it. Just get up close with it and you shouldn't get hit at all. Just make sure you're not too far away. Because you see, that shockwave goes off screen just a little bit. You see it still barely hits. Just make sure you're close enough with the first dragon, and that'll work. And of course you throw that next one to get rid of it. Here, if you're doing the slashes, I like to jump right when Lena enters the waterfall, and then you'll be able to jump and do 2 slashes easily. Jump over this dragon, and then this part is really tricky. So what I try to do is a full jump, and I try to start it right as Lena is starting to exit this waterfall. So it should be like here. Yep, I'm pressing the jump button. This is pretty much a perfect representation. Try to jump right around this point. And then it feels like you gotta slash a bit early. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. If you're taking knockback on this first dragon, you're probably slashing too late. But again, this slash is purely feel. Though I can say, with these kind of strats that I'm doing, where I do a full jump, and then on the come down I do a slash and jumping past the enemy, I'm pretty much doing the slash a little bit after Lena comes down from the peak of her jump. So it's a mix of that and just really having the feel for it. So once you get that, you can run a little bit, as you saw. And then this one's not too bad. It's just right as you land, do the slash. And then you want to take advantage of your sliding a bit here. So you'll see that I'm going to slide. Wasn't that much, but you do want to do at least a little slide coming out of that. And when you land in the water, you just want to jump out as soon as possible because it slows you down a lot. If you want to take the top route for here, you jump right at the beginning of this screen and go along the top route here. It's pretty simple. If you're taking the bottom route, it's a bit more complicated. But here you just jump in, do those slashes, and then jump over these two. Get the armor. And then when I throw this shockwave, see this little cutout window in the background? When Lena is just about center with that is when I jump and throw this shockwave. So I hit these two enemies here. If you throw it later, you're gonna hit this third one, and you need it to do the damage boost. And as for the damage boost, basically right after this enemy appears, I jump and throw a homing missile right away to stun it, and also pass through like this. And then a little bit before getting in the middle of these two pillars, I guess, is when I jump and then turn back. You'll see here I get the fast turnaround. If you want a fast damage boost like that, you need to be in a dash and turn around on the very next frame. It is a frame perfect mechanic. Otherwise, when you get hit here, you're going to lose your dashing speed, but you'll still get hit up to the top. It's just that when you get boosted, you're going to land right here, pretty much, a little more to the left. And what you're going to have to do here is immediately when you're able to, double tap to the right and jump. On the second tap, you press jump at the same time, so you're able to initiate the dash and also jump as soon as possible. You pretty much need to in order to not get hit by this dragon. If you get the fast boost though, you don't have to worry about it. You can also use a homing missile here to make sure you kill that enemy, just in case you potentially mess up the movement there. For this boss, the very beginning, it takes 13 hits to get into the second phase. Doesn't matter if you use the sword or the homing missile. Although using the homing missile is very good if you're going to get hit by any of these orbs. So 13 hits, and then I stand right at this spot, can stand forward a little more. The reason I stand here specifically is because on the 5th jump, I believe it is here. Yes. Right here, you see this thing is really close to Lena. And if I'm forward more, I tend to mistime it a lot more often. Because it takes 20 frames to be able to throw another homing missile, as well as to be able to slash again after doing a previous slash, it doesn't really matter too much where you are. So I line up there, and I start my jumps. You see the mountain in the background here, and you see the boss's purple attire on her shins and feet. Basically, it's just about at this point. I think it's a little more up. So yeah, like anywhere like at this point, I use as a visual cue to start jumping. This one I do a little bit late. Yeah, the first frame of the input. This is a little late. I do usually jump a few frames earlier, but that's the visual cue that I use. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Oh, it's 15 hits, not 17. If you want to know the frame data of doing this optimally, you jump and press the homing missile in the same frame. You hold jump for 10 frames. Let go. Use another homing missile. Jump, hold for 10 frames. Use another homing missile, rinse and repeat. And this third phase here, you see two things that already happened. First, you're using the sub-weapon to take care of when Nordell is swimming back and forth. This is the worst pattern that you can get, is when Nordell just endlessly swims back and forth, and you have to use 19 of this sub-weapon. It's multiple seconds slower, but the pattern that I demonstrate in this task here is the best one, and it's very specific as well. She'll swim here, stop right here, do 4 slashes. You can see how much more damage the sword does. And then she'll spawn here exactly, and then 4 slashes, and on the 4th one, that'll do it. So I'll show it one more time. I'll show the whole last 2 phases. So feet at the top of the mountain, 15 humming missiles. Then you equip. And you do 5 of these, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then 4 slashes. I think when Nordil spawns up like that, I think she always throws an orb like that. So you're gonna have to have quick reaction to jump right after she spawns upward to be able to get your 4 slashes. That is the best pattern there. You can get a pattern where she only spawns upward once. And it's not much slower than twice. But the biggest problem is when she doesn't spawn up at all and she just swims back and forth the whole time. That's much, much slower. Especially if she throws a bunch of orbs and you're taking damage. This stage is very tough. These Valkyries right away have 2 different diving attacks they can do. This is the only one that can be a real problem. But as you saw there, I jumped a bit after falling off the ledge. So you can see there was 5 frames that I was falling off and I'm still able to jump. This is a mechanic that you can do, and it is useful in a few spots. And this is one of them. So I do use it here, and the strat that I do overall is once I jump, I throw this sub-weapon right away, and then right when it hits this enemy, or even a little after is fine, just jump again, and throw the sub-weapon again. To get rid of those 2 flower things. And for this whole section here, I run until I get to just about the end. You'll see Lena's front foot is just about lined up with the end of this ledge. So I use this as a visual cue to do a full jump. And at the peak of this jump, I'm going to throw the sub-weapon, and that's going to hit the first Valkyrie. This timing is a little specific. You just don't want to be too late because it's not going to hit. Just remember to throw this at the peak of the jump, and you'll be okay. For this movement right here, I wait until I'm pretty close to this Valkyrie and then do the jump. You don't have to be super close. You basically just need to make sure that you run a little bit on this ledge here before you do this next full jump. And then you're going to use the slash and sliding and jumping technique here. Basically right when you land. It's a few frames before, but pretty much right when you land, you use the slash and you'll see that I'm going to slide a little bit. And then jump. And this should always hit this Valkyrie. Shouldn't have to worry about it. As long as you do this movement correctly. And as long as you're not landing from this jump too early, then the slash is always going to hit. It might look weird, and it probably looks sketchy, but you just got to take my word for it. Once you get the feel and the timing of all of it down, this will be pretty easy. I'll just play it back a few times so you can see. Again, jump here, throw at the peak of the jump, run a little bit, jump, and then slash, slide, and jump. Do your equips here. Slashing this last Valkyrie can be tricky, but there are two cues that I use. The first one, if you want a visual cue, is this boomerang enemy guy. Right when he disappears from the screen is when you can jump and slash. So you'll see. So now he's disappeared. And it's still like, that was a little under 10 frames after he disappeared, but got a little window there. Can jump and slash. What I actually use is an audio cue for the music, but you have to be doing the screen pretty much optimally, which isn't hard. That's why I use the audio cue, because I'm able to, you're able to reliably do this pretty optimally. So if you can like hear the rhythm to the music, it's like 1, 1, 2. So it's basically with the beat of the music. One, 2. 1, 2. It's hard to explain vocally, but if you got a sense of rhythm, you can get what I'm saying. You can probably hear it too. But you can use that as an audio cue. For this section, there's two things you can do. I use my method here because I just think it's a lot more reliable. So, remember what I said before about being able to run off a little bit and being able to jump? You're gonna do that here. So run off a little bit and do a full jump. And then you're gonna slash when you're about to hit the ground, and you're gonna really abuse the sliding here. You gotta slide a good amount. Sounds more difficult than it is. It's really not bad. You just have to know that you want to slide a good amount here. So that was 13 frames of sliding. So you get the idea. You got to slide a good amount here. And when you do that and do a full jump, you see I went through the enemy a little bit. So it just makes this a lot easier to be able to do the same thing for this enemy and get to the next ledge. The other way of doing it is you don't do this slashing method at all. You just run up to this enemy and jump, but it gives you less of a window here. So you're gonna land earlier from the jump that's shown here, and you're gonna have to slash and slide more here, which here I think you have to really slide a lot to get it. It really depends on where you did this jump at, how close to this enemy you jumped, which is why I do the other method that I showed, because it just makes the spacing so much more simple. The rest of this is really just getting a feel for how long you gotta hold the jump button. For most of these coming up here, you're holding the jump button for most of the jump, but you're pretty much actually just letting go a little bit after the peak, I'd say. A little bit after the peak of the jump. So coming up is where you're gonna use the armor. But I also want to discuss one thing here, because getting past this first enemy is really tough. I try to land as early as possible on this ledge here, and then try to immediately do a mostly full jump. Usually I'm letting go sometime after the peak of the jump, just kind of eye it out. Because when you land here, assuming you land at the very edge, you only have 4 frames to jump again. So you can see I did that on the 2nd frame. And I'm pretty sure there was a lag frame there maybe, but that might have been VLC advancing. So if you do get knocked back here a lot, just know it's a very small frame window. There's good reason why this might be going wrong frequently. It's just a really dumb jump. I wish it wasn't there, but we gotta deal with it, unfortunately. This next part here where I use the armor, I use it just before landing. And if you remember when I mentioned earlier that when you're dashing, if you want to turn around and keep your dashing momentum without having to restart it, then you need to input the opposite direction frame perfectly. It's a frame perfect mechanic. And what I'm doing here is buffering that opposite direction input by equipping the armor. So the game is technically paused while you're equipping this. Nothing's going on. And you see that I'm holding left now. So it acts as a buffered input. When I land from this, I'm not going to have to restart the dash. As you see. This set of enemies is really annoying because sometimes you get double hit. I've not been able to find a reliable way to avoid this. I initially thought I did by waiting to jump here as late as you can without losing movement frames, and then it just suddenly stopped working, so I don't want to say that's reliable. Pretty much just do these jumps and hopefully you don't get the double hit. When you equip the armor, there's also a chance that you can take 5 hits instead of 4. Unfortunately, the address value is tied to the RNG address. So in other words, it's total RNG whether you get that extra hit or not. With these enemies, you saw that first one turned around right away. It can either turn around and you don't take damage, or it'll keep walking to the left and you'll get hit here. Again, it's RNG whether it happens or not. I do want to point out here, it's actually possible to avoid getting hit. If you jump when Lena is like halfway off of this ledge, there's a chance that you'll make the full jump over and avoid it. But I've not been able to make it consistent at all, so that's why I don't want to share it, because it's not consistent and it does stop your movement a good bit. You probably lose like 1 second in movement, so it's just nothing that's come to fruition, at least yet. So you're just going to take this hit. If you're moving really optimally, you're going to have to slash at this Valkyrie, just so you know. And here I did. If you have the extra hit, you can do this sequence without stopping your movement. However, because of the boss coming up, even if you already have a hit to spare here, what I highly suggest is doing the same movement every time here, no matter what. And I don't get the extra, not hit here, but I do demonstrate the movement anyway. When you come to this point, you're going to do like a small jump and just stop. Let go of the D-pad right here. You're basically letting go right in front of the sub-weapon. And if you're really lucky, this enemy will camp the left side of the ledge and you won't take damage. You'll grab the sub-weapon and you'll get at least 1, potentially 2 extra hits for the boss, which in real time is very good for us. So that's why I recommend doing this movement no matter what. Now I'll show it a couple times here. Just like that. right when you get over this sub-weapon, stop all your momentum, grab it. And again, I don't show it here because I didn't get lucky. But if you do get lucky, you won't get hit here. This enemy will camp the left side. The last thing to mention before the boss is this jump is really annoying if you have the hitbox glitch enabled, which I don't think I went over before at all. But when you're transitioning any screen, if you're holding down, aka crouching, the game will store your hitbox pretty much infinitely unless you crouch again. Your hitbox will basically be cut in half. To be technical, the hitbox will be what it is when you're crouched, but that's basically half of the standing animation. So again, you just keep crouching until the screen transitions, which is pretty much just bosses, because you can't do that for the normal level screens. And from there on, your hitbox will be what it is when you're crouched, unless you crouch again. Then you get rid of the hitbox glitch. When you have that activated, this jump can be really annoying because if you can visualize right now, the top half of your hitbox is not there. So if you don't do this jump precisely, you're going to just run off this ledge here. If you don't have the hitbox glitch activated, this is simple because the top half of your hitbox is gonna stop you from just running off of this ledge here. With this boss, I really wish I could help with things, but there's really not much advice. There is a scripted beginning here where you throw a shockwave, slash, and then throw another shockwave. It's total RNG what patterns you're getting. So right there, that's scripted. And this boss will approach you from the left or right or up or down. The left or right is ideal because you can get a slash and double shockwave hit, as you're seeing here. This is a million times more difficult than it looks though. A lot of the time when you go for the slash, you're just gonna get hit. And you're not gonna be able to get the shockwave off. And as much as I wish I had a bunch of advice for this boss, that's really it. The one other thing that I can mention, and I'm gonna put this at normal speed. Most of the time, when he's spawning from the left or right side, you'll notice the game lags a lot more. I guess that's because his sprite is technically on screen on those sides or something. Maybe it's not when he spawns from the top or bottom. So look how much it's lagging. And then again, bunch of lag. In this one it won't be much. You see, or no, this one. Yeah, you see how much smoother that was? Right when all of the clones are spawning, try to figure out as soon as you can how much the game is lagging. And if there's not much, there's a high chance that Medius will spawn from the top or bottom. And if there's a bunch of lag, then there's a good chance that Medius will spawn left or right. This stage sucks major ass. If you have 4 shockwaves, you can use 2 at the beginning here to avoid using the slashing invincibility through that enemy. Those enemies in particular are very difficult to get through with slashing. So no, you're not lagging. The game is lagging very, very hard. And that's for most of this stage. I'll show this double shockwave method that I do here. So if you notice the floor pattern, I'm just going to call them blocks. So when Lena is about in between these last 2 blocks, a little more on the final one. That's a pretty late jump. So just try to do it a little bit earlier. This is definitely risky, but with continuing long, you throw a shockwave very shortly after jumping, because if you wait too late for this, you're going to be in the animation when you land, and you're going to lose your dashing speed. You also want to land from your jump right at the edge of this rising platform, because if you don't, you can already see it, you're going to get frozen by the icicle. And the hitbox glitch will help avoid close situations like this. You see it should be going through, but I'm all good. You just really want to make sure you land right at the edge there. As for this second one, when Lena is just about centered with this crack between the two blocks coming up, right here is when I try to jump and then press the shockwave button the frame after. And I'm not sure if this is a frame specific shockwave throw. You can just slash through this enemy if that's not trouble for you. This is just my method using 2 shockwaves. But doing this timing should avoid the icicle freezing you, as well as having trouble with this enemy. But it is very precise timing. So we'll see. Since this is real time, I press jump, and how many frames later do I press a shockwave? 1, 2. The second frame after it still works. Let's see, how close is it? Oh wow. Yeah, that's gotta be like a 2, maybe 3 frame window. Of course, you can do the whole sequence some frames earlier, but the problem is the icicle that's dropping. If you get this pattern, then it becomes very precise. And even with just slashing through, the timing is pretty much the same. So I guess everything I said applies to doing the slashes as well. So since I carried the armor, usually you don't. Sometimes you do. If you know the armor is going to wear off here, you don't want to kill your dash with the D-pad, you want to kill it with a slash. So you're going to slash into this enemy to keep as much momentum as you can without getting harshly knocked back. Just like that. You see how I'm stuck in place? If I just dashed right into him, I would get knocked back like past this wall. If you're doing the really advanced strategies, then you equip the armor at this point, so you take your first hit here, so you don't stop movement at all, you just keep going. But for the sake of the run here, this is what most people are going to be doing, so I wanted to show it. So again, right into him, kill your momentum with the slash. And then here, this is more advanced too, so I'll just go over it first and then I'll explain the easier alternative. So I use this armor equip as a visual cue to know if my jump afterwards is going to be good. And I'm buffering the jump. So what I look for is Lena's back foot is a little bit past this crack, separating these 2 blocks. And then you'll see I already have the jump button buffered in the middle of the animation. So right after I'm going to jump. And this jump is really tight. The way I do it is I input the jump at the time that I explained. And then a little bit after the peak, I let go of jump. This is really just more of a feel kind of thing. So you can see I'm still holding it, but now I let go. And you want to land in between this enemy and just right at the end, so you can jump when you land and not get hit by anything. This is the very advanced strategy. Don't worry, I will explain pretty much what you should be doing otherwise, unless you're going for a very top time. If you do this movement though, you have to take 1 hit coming up here, because the moving floor is on a the cycle the floor is on is pushed back a little bit since you're moving through the screen a little faster than if you're doing the alternative method. And the alternative method is pretty similar. Keep in mind, if you're doing this, do not equip this armor until later in the next screen. You can also equip it before the end of this screen if you want to take one hit and then try to be risky, but the time save is barely anything. So the easier alternative here is when you do this jump, you're going to time that jump a little bit later, because what you're going to do at around this point, you're going to be higher in your jump than what's shown here. You're going to be like at the ceiling still. Well, you're just going to let go of everything at this point. Go completely neutral. You come down from the peak of your jump neutrally, and you just land here. And even if you get hit by this enemy here, you're going to get knocked in place. You're not going to get knocked back or anything. So you can take the hit from the enemy and then start your dash again and jump out of this. And that's it. If you do that, you are going to be on a cycle here. You're usually going to be on the cycle where these spikes are not going to be visible. So you shouldn't have to worry about these spikes. It's only if you do faster strats. Also, if you're doing faster strats and you obviously mess up, then you'll be on a cycle where the spikes aren't there. So if you're doing more advanced stuff, you'll have 2 hits taken at this point. And this is the advanced movement. Try to stop right here so I don't take damage at all. You can sneak right by. And then here, these icicles drop at random times. So what I do is get in the range of it, and then I back out. And I basically just wait until both of them fall, and then I proceed. Because with this screen you have, if I remember correctly, it's 3.5 seconds of leniency where you can just stall and still make the cycle at the end. Basically, I'm using some of that time here so I don't get hit by these icicles, because if you do, it's basically over. And just be careful of this fuzzball. You see that you land pretty close to it, so you just got to jump right away out of it. If you want, you can stall here and slash this enemy 3 times to kill it if you're really paranoid about getting hit here. But I just go right through. On this enemy, you want to always take damage because of this icicle right here. If you try to stall here, then this enemy can throw a spear at you and it could just attack while you're waiting for the icicle to fall. And sometimes it could take a couple seconds for it to fall. So you're just using the invincibility to go through the icicle. When you're invincible, it won't freeze you. This part is very laggy because of the icicles and the fuzzball, and potentially the enemy right over here if he throws a spear. Moving the screen makes it a lot worse. So what you want to try to do is, again, stall here as much as you can just to reduce lag. And what I try to look for to know when I'm later in the cycle, if I have to get to the end like quick or not, is this rising wall here. Like you see this white texture at the bottom. When this moving ceiling gets a bit past it, then I know that I'm getting tight on time to make the cycle. So depending on that, you could also stall and kill this one. You're just gonna have to practice and see how much time you have to do these things. But in this example, I just slashed through it again. If you do get here really early, you can stall here and wait for this fuzzball to just about scroll off screen. Because if you keep moving, the game will lag a little bit. And that's because of this fuzzball. So that's why I stall here. This part sucks. unless you know you have an extra armor hit that you can take, you can actually go right through these spikes like I will in this video to avoid this icicle from falling and freezing you. If you're gonna do the jump, then you pretty much want to jump when you're on the left side of this pillar. So imagine that Lena is grounded right now and not in the air. In this position, you would double tap and then jump right away. And you have to do a small jump or else you're going to get hit by the icicle. So again, assuming Lena is grounded at this point, you're on the left side of the pillar, double tap and jump right away. And make sure it's a small jump because you'll get frozen if not. If the icicle takes a while before it drops, you'll be okay. But you gotta assume the worst. You gotta assume the icicle's gonna drop right away. So that's why you want to do that movement. And again, like I show in this video, if you know you have the extra hit you can take, you can just go through these spikes. You got the iframes. You also are just low enough as well to go through without getting frozen. Now, the visual cue that I use to know when to jump here, you see these hanging pillars in the background, and you see the spikes here at the top. When the tip of the spikes just about reaches the end of these hanging pillars that the spikes are right behind, is when I start to double tap and jump. So there's the first right input, and you see that the tip of the spikes are pretty much lined right up with the end of the hanging pillars in the background. You can also use the pillar ahead, and you see how the left side of it is pretty much lined up with the hanging pillar in the background. So you can use those two cues. And make sure you copy this movement as well, because there's spikes on some of these, including the one right after this. So you want to make sure you jump over that pillar. And you want to make sure you have an armor equipped here, because you're going to buffer an armor bomb on this fight. And this is the most simple fight by far. Like I say, you just buffer an armor bomb, equip the heart, and then equip the sub weapon after. And then you're gonna time your jump by waiting for the core to pretty much touch the spikes. And you're gonna do a full jump, and at the peak of your jump, you're gonna release a sub weapon. So you can see I start jumping now, and the core pretty much hit the spikes. It's pretty much hitting the ground. So you use that as a visual cue. Just hold the jump button the whole time. Wait till you get to the peak of your jump. And then throw that sub weapon. And it will make contact with the core every time. You can see how tight that space is. So that's why I use these cues to throw the sub weapon, because if you're a little early or a little late, it's not going to hit. Here at the start of Red Moon, you want to buffer a jump and left on the D-pad, so you land right at the top here. I believe when you start a screen, the game assumes you're on the ground for 6 frames no matter what. So that's how that jump is possible. You want to use this sub-weapon on those enemies accordingly. You will reduce like 13 to 15 frames of lag based on the theory test that I made a little while ago. Coming up here, I'm going to be buffering a turnaround dash with the pause button, because you really want this dash turnaround to hit into these enemies. I also got the fast boost there. To be really safe, you want to take a slow boost there. I'll explain why at the end of the screen. Some of those doppelgangers, they are on a global timer when they spawn. The one that I just passed was on one of them. You equip your armor here, and this is based on luck, these fireballs. Ideally you want to get hit 0 times, which I do. And ideally you can carry this armor all the way until the final boss, Gallagher, which I will demonstrate here, but it's going to happen pretty rarely. And the reason that I mention doing the safe slow boost in the middle of this stage is because the doppelganger that's about to spawn right above where Lena is, since some of those are based on the global clock, if you get here a little bit later than usual by taking the slow boost, being a little less optimal, this doppelganger will spawn like in this area and it won't hit you. Whereas here, it'll hit you if you try to jump into the transition. And I don't believe that you can always just run through here. This bottom doppelganger should hit you, but for some reason it doesn't hit me here. But I just continued anyway. But I do want to point out that I don't think this is a reliable thing. I've just ran through this multiple times and have gotten hit. So the next screen here is really tough to get down. Some of the fireballs are on a global clock. Well, all of them are. But some of them move either very fast or very slow. And the one right here, this one is the slow moving fireball, but it can move a lot quicker. It would be like basically right in front of Lena at this point if it's a fast fireball. So this part is tricky. What I try to use as a visual cue here to jump is, like, you see the patterns on the ground here that I'm running on. I just try to visualize that with Lena and just jump in the middle of this ground here. You do a full jump, because you want to land right at the edge here. And you want to land at the edge because some of these fireballs are also based on your height. So its y-axis will be different based on your height on the screen. So it doesn't look like it, but this fireball spawned a little bit earlier when I was at the peak of my jump. So you're doing a full jump and landing right at the edge here to get the fireball to spawn as high as you can. Because this whole sequence here is very tight. You're basically running a tiny bit and then doing a very small jump here. I actually flick the jump button to try to make it a one framer. So you do a very small one, you'll see you get right under the fireball. And then you also need to use this shockwave late, because if you try to use it like right here or even a little later, it's going to hit the fireball. If you get the fast fireball pattern, this is much easier to avoid. But in this instance, you can see I have the Y button input and it's very late in my jump. And you can see I barely missed the fireball. The hitbox for the shockwave seems pretty accurate to its visual representation, if you just imagine it like a big square. Though I don't know the hitbox exactly, it just seems to represent the visual subweapon pretty well. And you also throw that shockwave at a timing where this fireball doesn't get hit either. Where it's not necessarily a timing, it's just the position of the shockwave. Doing the whole sequence lets you not hit this fireball either. So you come down from the jump. You're able to avoid it. For the jump that follows this one, you need to land on the ledge ahead, right on the very left edge, because the fireball coming up is another one of those that can either move slow or very fast. So doing this movement is going to accommodate for the very fast one, and obviously the slow pattern, it won't even come close. So let me see what this one is. This one's a slow pattern. So you do see that I land right on the edge here, because if you can imagine, if this was the fast fireball, it would be right in front of Lino right now. What I like to do to make sure I don't mess this up is to do a small jump right at the end here. Just a little tap of the jump button. Just to make sure when I time the input, it's going to be spaced correctly. And then here, you're going to do a full jump. And you want to slide a bit, because most of the time you're not going to land as far to the right as I am here. So you're going to use the shockwave and slide a little bit and then jump. Because if you try to use the shockwave on the center or more center left side of this ledge, it's not going to hit this dragon coming up. Looks tougher than it is, but you just got to get the feeling down. To hit this next shockwave after you drop from this ledge, you're going to use the shockwave close to when you hit the ground. So you can see I start using it here. And you're just going to make sure you jump right when you land so you don't lose your dash speed. These next two are pretty simple. Just with this one here, just make sure that you jump and input the sub weapon quickly. You don't want to space them out too much, or else the shockwave isn't going to hit. And also make sure you don't throw it too late, or else it's going to hit the fireball. So just like that. This one isn't hard, but this one here, what I try to do is just wait for the fireball to appear on screen, and then a little bit after it's spawned. I'm like kind of close to it, but not right up on it. So when you get like kind of close to it, you want to very briefly tap the jump button. I try to swipe my thumb on the jump button, so I only press it for 1 frame. And then you use this coming down from your jump. You see I'm using it here. There's like a decent amount of space between here and the ground. But I actually got a really good shot here where I don't hit the fireball. 9 times out of 10 you're going to hit this fireball here. But I actually did this so I could get the right pattern for Lizard, the boss, right after this. So again, wait until you see the fireball a little bit after it's on screen, do a short jump, and just try to time that shockwave as best as you can. You don't want to throw it late, because if you throw it late, you're going to be too close to this dragon, and it's going to blow you back after you hit it. And then the ending sequence is going to be all messed up because you got fireballs appearing on screen. So that jump here, I did a full jump, so this fireball is up pretty high on the screen. And again, I do a short jump here towards the end of the ground, so I don't hit the fireball. See, it's pretty close. And I have it spawned up about as high as you can get it. So make sure you do a short jump here. You also want it to be a short jump, so you don't get blown back by this dragon here. And then at this point, you can just hold right, and you'll collect that armor, and move on to the most annoying boss in the game, along with Medius. With Lizard, there's two ways his pattern can open up. What you want is for him to stay on screen. So you're going to see when I dash up to hit him, he's going to stay there and then swoop to the left and then rise back up and despawn. You really want this pattern because, as you see, you can get a bunch of hits in and he stays on screen for a while. And before I get to those swoops, the other pattern that can happen here is when you hit him with the first slash, Lizard will disappear right away, and it's like a 4 or 5 second time loss. And that's actually going to be shown after this sequence here. But with this sequence here, basically I like to manipulate the height where he spawns, because when he's getting ready to appear on screen, the height is going to be chosen relative to where you are on screen. So he's basically choosing to swoop now, and this is my height. So this is where Lizard is going to be. A lot of this is timing. There is like visuals as well. At least for this first jump, I wait until like 1 second after Lizard is completely off screen, and then I start this whole jumping sequence. So you see he's up in the air now because I manipulated that. And so right when you land, you want to jump up, hit him with a slash, and then turn around and hit him with another one. Just back-to-back slashes. This is possibly the toughest technique in the whole run. So if this takes you a really long time to get down, don't be hard on yourself about it. Personally, this took me a really long time to get double hits as well. If you look through a lot of my older PBs, I don't even do this stuff yet. So again, basically, you're just jumping again pretty much right when you land. And you're basically, again, just jumping right when you hit the ground. And there, he swooped back and forth 4 times. He'll either do it 3 times or 4 times for this fight. In the refight, he will swoop back and forth 6 times. So remember that, because I don't think I'm going to go over that fight. It's pretty much exactly the same as this. It just takes more hits. So you'll see here he disappears. You don't want that to happen, because you have to wait all that time to slash him. And it's even worse if he disappears at the very beginning, like I mentioned earlier. So, like I said before, you can carry this armor all the way to Gallagher, but most of the time it's not going to happen. You want to try to get rid of the armor at this boss in that case, which can cost you some time, but it's way less than getting destroyed by Medius 2. And the boss rush, there isn't really anything to go over. It's pretty similar to the normal boss explanations. It's just, I guess for this boss in particular, you're not using any shockwaves, you're just doing all slashes. Assuming you're unable to carry the armor from Red Moon all the way to Gallagher, the final boss, you want to get rid of it during this fight somehow, even if it costs you a little bit of time. It's not going to be as much as if you don't have armor in Medius 2. Otherwise, as you see in the video, just equip the shockwave and keep going. With Medius 2 here, same concept as the first fight. In my opinion, it's just easier to see where he actually spawns on this screen. I don't know if it's the background aesthetic or what. This fight is really hard to do in a somewhat optimized manner, or just like in one full cycle. It's really hard to do because it takes Medius a lot more hits to die in the refight than it does in the normal one. So if you want to get a fast kill, you basically need those doubles on almost every cycle. And you'll see here, I don't take any damage from these fireballs, but you have to assume that you're not going to get this pattern. This doesn't happen that much, and I didn't even intend to get this pattern, it just happened. So most of the time, you'll take another 2 hits here. And as long as you took 2 or less hits during this fight, you should just tank these hits, because you're going to miss like 3 or 4 slashes, I think, if you just try to dodge the fireballs. You might miss more than that. Either way, if you can, just tank the hits and just keep slashing. Ideally, you want to keep this armor past this fight. Like, if you equipped another armor before this fight, you really want to keep it. If you don't keep it, and you're not going for a more optimized time, like it's not the end of the world, you're just going to be short 1 armor bomb for Gallagher. I don't think there's anything for this refight that I can mention that I didn't already mention in the first fight. When he swoops here, it will be 6 times. If you get the disappearing pattern, where he disappears right away, sometimes he'll only swoop 4 times instead of 6. But if you do get the good pattern to start with, he will always swoop 6 times. So this is where I can talk about what's different between this and the normal lizard fight. Is here you can just get an extra hit in, and I'll show you where that extra hit is. So this one here, right? No, this one. This slash. I would not go for this one, just saves 20 frames. You can safely not do this slash, dash over, and then he's gonna die on this hit, but you can get 1 more hit after this. So you don't absolutely have to go for that extra hit on the left side, and I really wouldn't recommend it. It makes this fight a lot more difficult. Unfortunately, this Gallagher fight is just completely full of RNG, and most of it is not practical towards the runner. To start though, you want to buffer an armor bomb, hold upright, and buffer the Y button. This gets rid of the first phase where he just throws orbs around. It's like basically a cutscene, but you can get rid of it doing that. And then you basically just unleash these armor bombs. As far as I know, it's just complete RNG, what movements he does. But I have noticed that he will either start jumping right away or he'll stick there in place, and most of the time do an ice attack. He's got a lot of attacks that are huge time losses. The ice attacks are 4 to 5 seconds each. The laser attacks, which are even worse, can be 3 to 8 seconds. He can also just stall there and do absolutely nothing. You can't hit him. Pretty much he needs to be jumping or just not completely idle for him to take damage. So here, you can't hit him, have to wait. But he does jump up here, and I get the best orb pattern here. There's 1, 2, 3 different ones he can do. And this is the pattern where he spawns the orbs immediately, so you can duck under him, and you can get 2 combo slashes 4 times. So like 4 jumps for 2 slashes each. I'm going to finish him off really quick, so you're only going to see 2 jumps, and I only get this slash in. But you can get another slash on this jump, and then jump again for 2 more slashes, and then jump 1 more time for 2 more. So that's why that orb pattern is the best. The second best, you have to wait a couple seconds to get your hits in, and you only get 5. Or no, 3. It's only 3 instead of 8. And then the absolute worst pattern is when the orbs are circling around him, because you usually have to wait a while before those all go away. You can barely get any hits in. Although you can stand as far away from Gallagher as you can and still hit him and not get hit by those spinning orbs, but that's very risky. I know I can't show a lot of these things that I was talking about, but I think by just watching fights of this boss and just taking in the information that I said, hopefully it's good enough to visually represent how to do this fight. And it sucks because there's really not much execution advice I could give. His patterns are complete RNG, and it seems like your movement also influences what he does, but like you can't really control that because you don't know where the RNG started off in the first place. And the movement manipulation is probably frame specific as well. The only thing I noticed is sometimes he does get in these fits where he just jumps a lot, which of course is great. But it seems like if he does that, he's doing it on his own. I do have the maximum armor here. So, assuming that you don't, which is going to be 95% of the time that you get here. His health bar isn't going to be down as much. It's only going to be down to this point, which is pretty significant. If you go from here... Yeah, see? That is significant. I think it's 8 slashes. I can't remember because I tested it like really quick, but I think it's either 7 or 8 slashes worth. The only other thing I noticed is that when his health visually gets to around half, usually a little over half, is when he'll start having the possibility of having those orb patterns. Otherwise, it's pretty much just up to fate if you're gonna get good patterns or not. So hopefully I concluded this commentary well. I wish I could do a much more formal and, more scripted and detailed and way better visual video editing. I wish I could do all that with a tutorial, but for me it's just very mentally overwhelming to try to do all that and try to get it all together when I don't have any previous experience with this stuff. It's just simply very mentally overwhelming. And I am done with this game at this point. I'm totally moving on. I got all my speedrun goals, which is great. I just wanted to put out some form of tutorial, or just attempted tutorial. And I hope this helps you guys. Hopefully it didn't turn out too long, but it's probably still like an hour or something, maybe more. And anyway, that's it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and most importantly, I hope it helps.